I'm Christina and welcome to Breaking Out of Breaking In, a practical filmmaking podcast about taking your creative career into your own hands and making great work that gets seen without playing the Hollywood game.
At least while changing the rules. Hi, I'm Bri Castellini, your other co-host, and today we are breaking down our 2023 so far. But before we dive in, don't forget that we make bonus content, including bonus podcast episodes available exclusively over on our Patreon at patreon.com/breakingoutpod. That Patreon makes it possible for us to continue making this show. So definitely go check out what's offered there. Tiers start, I believe, is as low as $1. But I mean, if you wanted to give more, there's even more stuff that you could unlock. But in any case, hello everybody! It's our mid-year update episode. This is obviously a weirder year to do this since we're only releasing one episode a month, and I feel like we're a little more casual about a lot of the stuff. But you know, there's stuff that we can update you on. Some exciting, some annoyingly vague, but you know, that's what it is. So Christina, how are you today?
I'm good. Today, I finally slept last night after a really bad week of not sleeping well. So I wouldn't say I'm well rested, but
but you're getting there. Yeah. Christina has transferred her sleep problems over to me because literally yesterday she was like, I'm working on something to get better sleep because I've had a rough couple of nights. And then literally last night, I could not sleep at all. So she's a witch. That's my update for the year. It's the most important one so far. But I guess I'll forgive her because I wasn't sleeping well anyways. Frankly, I can carry this burden. I will do that for you.
Thanks.
So I thought we'd start with a couple of quick strike updates. Since we're recording these in a more timely fashion now, we can do a little bit more breaking news style stuff. So like, there's not obviously big strike updates. The main strike update is it's still a strike.
Today makes a month, right? Like exactly a month. Yeah, June 2nd.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we were recording this on June 2nd to orient you in time. So perhaps something will have happened. But we won't know until next month what is happening with SAG. Although right now they are currently asking membership to vote to authorize a strike. They unanimously authorized a strike vote, which apparently is pretty unprecedented for SAG. And so now the membership is voting, and I think we will hear at the end of June what the result of that vote is. Mm-hmm. Then they will start negotiating, and then we'll see. I kind of think SAG's going to strike, though. I mean, they only need 75% of the people who vote to authorize in order to be authorized for a strike, but SAG has just as much to lose to specifically the AI problem as writers, and in some ways more, because the technology is a little bit more sophisticated to fake somebody's voice or even face, because they've been using it to de-age actors and stuff like that. So those technologies have been in development for so much longer, mm-hmm. and it's a little bit easier to kind of skate over that. There's also been a recent I guess I don't know how recent, but there was a conflict recently where I want to say it was an Amazon thing where they used AI voice from an actual AI voice actor to record some audiobooks, and it's currently in litigation. I'll try to find the article, but they're already doing this. They're already trying to replace people using the work that they've done before to preclude them from getting work in the future. So hey, if you're listening to this, if you are a SAG member and you want to continue being a SAG member and you want to continue trying to make a living acting, vote to authorize a strike, y'all. Solidarity is the only way we're getting through this.
Yeah, seriously. It's just so wild because the people who are making the decisions, I mean, they're obviously just always short-sighted, and we talk about this all the time, but it's just if we're all replaceable, then so are you. So
they don't say it like that because they're special.
Right, of course. I mean, it's a lot easier, I would say, for a computer to do operations and run a company than for it to be creative. And
oh, absolutely. Yeah. Half of the people who get paid the most money in Hollywood are completely redundant positions. Mm-hmm. But because they have enough money to have power and enough power to have money, the vicious cycle, they are the ones who are making it hard for everyone. It's very irritating. I guess the only other update related to the strike that is that I believe I talked about this at some point on the podcast, but I have a part-time job with the CBS Leadership Pipeline Challenge, which is a like nonprofit design thinking fellowship lab kind of thing where they take assistant level folks at Viacom CBS and filmmakers from underrepresented organizations around Los Angeles, and they put them on filmmaking teams. They give them a bunch of mentorship and education, and then they go off to make short films for local nonprofits. Both as a training ground for indie film as well as to give these nonprofits some cool new content to share. And it's currently on pause. Literally, the strike was authorized, or the strike like went live, and that was the week that our teammates were supposed to start writing their scripts so that they could go into production in June. They should have been starting production like today, but there was enough confusion that multiple of the screenwriters that are at the program had reached out to the WGA to see like, does this count as scabbing? It's not a CBS production. We're not being paid to write. Like this is an existing kind of like lab program. And also CBS doesn't own the content. Like it's owned by these nonprofits, which are obviously non-union. And the two people who reached out to the WGA both got different answers, which is sort of an ongoing problem with the strike, specifically related to like non-union people, which we talked about in our episode. It's not been the most consistent, but like then the people who like the admin team who's in charge of the program went and spoke to the lawyers and I think also WGA, and ultimately decided like just to be safe, since obviously a lot of the writers in this program like are in this program because they want to write for TV, because there's enough of a gray area, we don't want to like F them over. I don't know why I said F, like I'm suddenly censoring myself. We don't want to fuck over these writers in their future, endeavors that we're trying to set them up for. So the decision was made to pause the program indefinitely until the strike is resolved and they are able to resume working without fear of being seen as a scab. So that's obviously the right choice. I like, even if I don't necessarily think that what they're doing should count as scabbing, I understand that like it's a gray enough area that like better safe than sorry. Also, a lot of the people that they would be like hoping for mentorship from are probably about to be striking or are already striking. So like the access they would have had anyways is a little bit more restricted. But it's definitely frustrating, it's that these teams set aside like a dedicated amount of time to like go into production. Obviously summer is one of the best times to produce in Los Angeles for weather reasons and availability, but strikes are meant to be disruptive, et cetera, et cetera. So that's an update for me, is that and because I'm an hourly worker, obviously I'm not getting paid right now. So that's too bad, but it's a side hustle. So
yeah, it's tough. Like I feel like this strike is much more complicated than last time because there's so much. I mean, we don't have a lot of transparency in a lot of ways, but there is much more transparency about who is kind of like attached to a thing. And so now there's just so many gray areas, but it's hard for someone to like not find out that information, to say that they didn't know that like CBS was obviously it has CBS in the title, but in other instances like festivals where the judges are maybe from struck companies, that's a lot more
or the rewards is a meeting with an exec from a struck company.
Yeah, so it's like harder now. The union has to draw harder lines than they did before because it's clearer whether or not it's like directly actually feeding the pipeline for the studios. It's still such gray areas that it's sort of better safe than sorry, because right at the end of the day, what they're fighting for is the future of everyone who isn't even in the union yet, and hopefully one day will be. So yeah. But it is tough when it's like strikes are supposed to be disruptive, but often because of capitalism and everything, they end up being more disruptive for the people that are really just like trying to get by and trying to be creative than for the actual people at the top. Like the studios are already hemorrhaging money and don't seem to give a shit. So
I mean, they can't go on indefinitely. Like at a certain point, they're going to have to be like.
I think it's just like, I mean, they're obviously looking at the, they're like a little bit, quote unquote, a little bit of money now for the future of not having to hire people at all is what they're looking at, right? But it just goes back to like they are replaceable too in that future. So everyone should be banding together, and hopefully once the unions do, once they see that, then we'll actually start getting some regulation on AI within the industry, hopefully.
We'll see, especially if SAG, I think will be the most disruptive, obviously,
For the
because it's
stars.
got like
Yeah.
a billion times the membership of any of these other ones. And like, you can theoretically be on set without a writer. Not well, but you can be. And, you know, a director's strike, which is apparently not very likely, is a little bit more disruptive, but again, there's fewer members there. But like, if there's an actor's strike, they're fucked.
Mm-hmm.
So I really, really hope that SAG goes on strike or authorizes it, and that puts the fear in the AMPTP to get their shit together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But for now, we're still kind of in a holding pattern. So solidarity to everybody. We made our bonus post for last month's episode with Brandy free on our Patreon. So if you're looking for a good kind of like master post of WGA Strike explainers, videos, articles, things like that, then that's a good place to go and to point to people. It's a free post, so you don't have to subscribe to get access to it. So I encourage you to seek that out if you're still confused. I have used that to rant to a lot of people recently. I got my haircut a couple of weeks ago, and in my hometown of Colorado, and my hairdresser, who I've seen since I was 5,
Mm-hmm.
like didn't know what was going on. First, she didn't realize there was a writer's strike at all, and then when I just sort of like offhandedly mentioned it, she was like, "That what does that mean?" And I spent like the entire haircut. It was the easiest haircut I've ever had. Even though I love this woman, I've seen her since I was 5. I'm so bad at small
Me
talk.
too. Oh my God.
But then I didn't have to do small talk. I basically just did our episode to my hairdresser. By the end, she was like, "Hell yeah, I'm glad they're striking. Good for them." Oh, that's what my month is, just like explaining what the writer strike means to a bunch of people who are completely outside of Hollywood. And like they're all sort of like tangentially curious about the AI part of it all. But when I explained like mini rooms and like staff writer quotas and the difference in residuals from a streaming show versus like a network show with reruns, that's what really has been galvanizing people, because they're like, obviously, and this has been a big part of the discourse, is like people from outside of Hollywood assume that every TV writer is like hugely rich.
Mm-hmm.
And understanding how untrue that is and how much more untrue the studios want it to be has seemed to be the kind of moment of aha,
Yeah.
the aha moment for a lot of the outside Hollywood people. So hey, at least regular Joes are understanding the issue too.
That's good.
So in terms of duo updates, I thought we could do our co-update. We have not only a finished script for our co-written feature, Breaking
Breaking
In,
in.
but we also have a first, or an almost first revised version.
Yep. By the end of today, we will have a revised version. Yeah.
And the notes weren't that comprehensive.
Mm-hmm.
Like, not they weren't comprehensive, but like they weren't huge notes. Like we didn't, so far at least, have to do any major restructuring or anything. It was just sort of like little moments to push things further, moments where they're like,
Punch
you
it
guys
up.
should maybe calm down a little.
Yeah.
Because like the first third of the script is just like almost verbatim conversations Christina and I have during and after podcast recordings about how frustrated we are.
Mm-hmm.
So fair note, fair note. Thanks to friend of the pod, Jerry Maravilla, for being one of our first readers and note givers, as well as friend of the pod, Ryan Kramer, who hasn't been on the pod, but is still a friend of the pod.
Yeah. He's been mentioned.
Yeah, he's definitely been mentioned before. But yeah, thanks to Ryan and Jerry for our notes. We're looking forward to having a new revised version and sending it out to additional people. And then probably before end of summer, we'll try to do a table read, right?
Yeah,
Does that
yeah.
seem like a fair timeline to announce?
Sure, yeah, I would say that's right. Initially, we this idea started because back in December 2021, I went into a deep dive into someone's social media because I was like frustrated with not being able to find a house, basically, and nothing happening with my career.
Sure.
And then it turned into a funny story, and Bri was like, this would be a funny movie, and
I enabled her.
Yeah, but then we like dropped it for a whole year, and then it came back around this past December, and we did our outline, and then I think we didn't really start writing until February or March, maybe.
Yeah, not until February, because like we did the outline at the end of last year, at the end of 2022, but then like I was finishing up NaNoWriMo that year because I had written 3 books last year. Remember that? And then January, I was coming back to work, which is always like a busy time. And then I had a writer's retreat with my husband for my birthday at the end of January, where I was doing more novel stuff. So like I was not in a position to start working on this script. And I think you were doing rewrites as well.
Yeah, I was doing a
Question
rewrite.
mark.
Yeah, for my last
I feel like
rewrite.
both of us
Yeah.
ended up with stuff in January. But yeah, then February we kind of hit the ground running, and we wrote the full script by like mid-April. I
Yeah,
want to say.
yeah, because we were like, there was a screenplay competition. That's what I was gonna say. There was a screenplay competition in May that we were thinking of submitting to, and then the strike happened, and then we were like, okay, we can't submit to anything, but we still made the deadline, to have a first draft soon enough that we could send it for feedback and theoretically make a revision in time for the deadline. And the deadline has passed. We haven't submitted, so we figured, what else can we do other than doing revisions? Is maybe do a table read, and that'd be a fun way to hear it out loud and hear people react to it, especially because it is supposed to be funny. So, if people don't laugh, that's a problem.
Totally. Yeah, I feel like table reads for comedy more than anything are so vital, not just prior to filming, but prior to final revisions. Because, like, there is so much difference between what's funny when you're reading it in your head and what's funny when you have an actual actor reading it. Also, especially now that there's a strike, like, I do think that this will be a cathartic reading experience for a lot of our friends.
Yeah.
So that's definitely something that we wanted to capitalize on as well, like the giving us a fun reason to complain together, but then also getting like a bunch of immediate feedback about like, does this feel real to you? Like, is it too real? You think this will make sense to people who are not, us?
Yeah. Because it's like,
I'm theoretically excited.
Just for context, it's a breaking into the industry satire, and it gets real.
Yeah, it's like two frustrated filmmakers attempting to break into the industry and who get like waylaid by an investigation into a more successful peer.
Yeah, I mean, I love it, obviously, because it's so close to us and it feels
right.
It feels timely, and it's like duality is really fun because the same way the title has dual meanings, the whole script can be read as like a straightforward thing or as just all an allegory, right? And so
absolutely.
Yeah.
No, I'm really proud of it. This is the first feature that I've really written. Thank God you were there. Having a co-writer was so vital. But yeah, every time we talk about it, it's fun. Every time we have a meeting about rewrites or about plans, it's fun. Who knows what'll ever happen with this script, but I'm glad we wrote it.
Yeah, and co-writing has been such a fun experience because you're like, at least in my experience, I would be inspired by your new pages, and that would just like get me going. Because we did it basically like roughly 10 pages at a time each. Sometimes we'd go up to 15 maybe, and I think neither of us ever went lower than 9. But yeah, it would just be like, okay, when one of us hits a wall, we toss it off, and then it was just a great way to move it. Like, we really wrote it very fast because of that, because there was this like momentum each time we each got it.
No, totally. And having that outline ahead of time and having really talked through not just like the beats, which did change obviously as we wrote, and we realized like, oh, this is redundant, or oh, I think we can skip through to this, but also something that came through in the outlining phase that I think was really important was like thematically and motivation wise, like why characters were making decisions. Even if we didn't stick to the like literal beat we'd written down in the outline, we understood what that beat was supposed to mean because we talked it through and really broke down like why these characters are behaving the way they are, what they actually want, and what they're doing in the meantime because they can't get that for one reason or another. And that was also really clarifying in the writing process and made it super easy to change things on the fly, even if like we did go pretty far away from the original outline. So that was helpful too.
Yeah, for sure.
Definitely outline.
Yeah, it's funny. When we did one of the things we did this year was do kind of workshop, really just sort of a talk conversation at Cinema Femme Film Festival. And and it was that workshop that we did was about writer's block, breaking out of writer's block. So I re-listened to our episode, and in that episode, I said that I don't outline. And
Yeah, I think you did.
and I was like, okay, well, that has changed in 2 years. I definitely
Well, and
outline now.
I mean, do you outline for just you too? Because I think in this case, like it was a
It was a
necessity if we were
necessity
going
for
to
us to
co-write
write together.
something.
But now I definitely would probably not outline as extensively as we did. But because it was like, in this case, we were each bringing something to the table, we needed to
Sure.
really fully understand where we were each coming from. It absolutely
And
made
it was a
sense. Yeah,
mystery.
it's a mystery.
So there were like,
You need it like fleshed out before you can even bring
yeah,
it to page, because it's like, what are we hinting at? Where are our clues? All of that. But
sure.
I do think that moving forward, I will do more outlining in general.
Wow. That's been an evolution. All right. So, how about you? Is there anything you can reveal to the podcast audience about what's going on with your career at writing right now?
Yeah, I'm trying to. So at the beginning of my mom had a heart attack over New Year's Eve. I feel like I should just put that out there. Thankfully, she's doing well, and I'm so grateful. But the whole first month of the year is like a total fucking blur for me because I was so stressed out and so worried, and yeah, so like I don't even know exactly the timeline, but somewhere by March, I did a revision, like a final revision. And so by the time March rolled around, the script had been approved and we were like officially moving beyond that. And I officially got to put my director hat on, which was like such a relief. And and so we started talking about certain pre-production things while the production company I'm working with is not a struck company. But based on how much financing we need, the strike has now complicated like further reaching out for funding. So that's on pause, but otherwise we got a lot like in that March to May window fleshed out in terms of like where are we shooting it, and generally I wouldn't say like when, but the film is set in fall, and so it's always been a general like understanding that we are aiming for this fall. And the biggest progress really has just been like casting. I can't really talk about anything because nothing is anything yet. But I did get to, write a letter to someone I am a fan of for a role that I always envisioned as like a scream queen from the 80s playing. And so I got to write a letter as the director of like, I would love you in this role. And so this person may or may not have read the script in my letter. Maybe just their people read the script in my letter. I don't know. But that's kind of like the status as of now. And things are just like super, super vague because now we're on the cusp of other strikes, right? And so it's like we're still hoping that things will be resolved by the fall. I also feel like, worst case, you could probably cheat very early spring for late fall. And so there's that. And most of the film is set indoors overnight. Like there are quite a few exteriors, but they're all at night. And so, movie magic, we'll see. But my hope for myself and for this film and for what I've been hoping for so long is that it does happen this fall. But my bigger hope is that the strike or strikes result in good results for everyone who is a creative in this industry, because that ultimately is what's best for me in the long run, right? And so like I'm hoping that these two things can happen simultaneously and my movie can happen, and also we get good wins out of striking. But at the end of the day, like that is obviously a priority because I want to have a career beyond just making my one movie, if I hopefully do even get to make it. So yeah, that's where we are. And it's been cool. Development was really hard. I spent a year getting notes, and I think part of it was like they had other projects, so there would be months between revisions or hearing from them. But then once like we got to the end of that, it has just been like full steam ahead meetings, and I've been much more in the loop as like director as opposed to writer doing revisions. And the relationship was very vague early on because it was more of like a mentorship thing until it officially became we're producing this thing. And so yeah, it's been really cool to finally get to think about the creative side. Like even if I haven't been working with them on that stuff, I've at least like they asked me a whole bunch of creative questions in order to put together the budget. And so I then like got to put that hat on. And I started putting together, like sort of Pinterest boards for certain things like the set dressing in the house and things like that are just for me, just to be like in director mode for hopefully it happening when I wanted to this year. So we'll see.
We'll see. Yeah, I mean, hey, it's still development hell, but at least it's new development hell.
Yeah, yeah. And I will say, while it was frustrating, I learned a lot through the process, and I feel like it's better. The script is better. Because it forced me to be creative within parameters. Like, okay, this is what we need out of this specific thing. And then I would go into problem solving mode to make sure that I came up with something that met that need. And like that, I think, is where I thrive, is like give me restrictions and force me to be creative within them. And I have a lot of fun with it. And so I found the fun in it. I found the fun in exec notes.
No, that's good. And I mean, it's the indie filmmaker and you coming out. It's why it's so valuable to have made your own work previously, especially with limited resources. Like there's making your own work when you're like a rich kid.
Yeah.
And there's making your own work when you're broke as hell and working 3 jobs. And I think that's the real like training ground for everything, because that you're going to have restrictions for the rest of your career, even if you have a relative blank check, for making whatever you want once you quote unquote broke in. And I feel that having made it yourself is such an important part of that process. I cannot fathom these poor writers who are like not being given on set producing experience, let alone their own indie producing experience prior to that. Like I can't even imagine how I would think about writing.
Yeah.
Like so much of my writing has expanded and evolved because I've been on set, and it has made me a better writer and a more interesting producer. So even though the indie film industry right now is kind of a mess, I still really do believe in it, and I am so glad that I spent the time that I did, and maybe in the future, making work for myself and my friends.
Yeah.
My mom also had not a health scare because we knew it was coming, but my mom also had a health thing this year that certainly set me back. It specifically set back our revisions by a little bit. So the last month, basically all of May, I was home in Colorado because my mom had a hip replacement surgery, and it was something that like in the past probably 2 years or so has been more and more like inevitable. But like my mom had been experiencing like a lot of pain, and it really came to a head in February, March. She was in Los Angeles and San Diego in the near beginning of spring, partially for a work conference and to visit my brother and I, because she hasn't actually come out to LA since both of us lived here yet because of like the pandemic and everything like that. And so she came out for the first time, and she had a really hard time. Like we didn't do a lot of walking, but like my brother took her to the beach. We all went to the motion picture or the Academy museum. It's like the new Academy Awards museum. It was a cool museum. And then we walked to lunch from there, like a half a mile. And like my mom usually is like a power walker. Like she's practically sprinting, but technically walking. And that trip, she had really, really hard time like keeping up. Going upstairs was particularly painful for her because of like whatever was going on with her hip. So she finally, like at the end of that trip, she's like, actually not even at the end of the trip, like in the middle of that trip, she called her doctor from my living room and was like, get me a hip replacement. I can't keep doing this. She also has a very walk heavy work profession, so that was whatever. So at the beginning of May, she had her surgery. Quinn and I, my husband and I, went to Colorado to be kind of like her post-surgery caregivers. It all went fine. According to the surgeon, things were even worse than we thought from the initial x-rays once he was actually like in there and looking at all the bones. So he was like, I know she was hesitant to do this, like even up until like we were in the hospital pre-surgery, and my mom was like, her heart rate was spiking, and she was like, "What if I just didn't? Do you think it would be fine?" And I'm like, "Mother, you can't walk up the stairs right now. Of course you need this." But anyway, so it all went well.
That's good.
So other things going on with me, mostly been romance stuff. Although I did write a new pilot this year. Who knows? Did I text my writer's feedback? I don't think I did. Whoops. She texted me 3 days ago. Whoops. Sorry, Sarah. Um, but yeah, so I've mostly been doing prose still. I haven't the pace is not nearly the same as it was last year. By this point last year I had written 2 books, or two, one and a half maybe. This year I've only written like maybe a quarter of a book, although I am enjoying it. And this is weirdly, I am now anti-outline. I'm not anti-outline, but every time I try to outline this book, I just write more instead. So I'm kind of just like slow rolling it and just sort of seeing where it goes. Since like officially what I'm supposed to be doing is revising. So I revised the whole first book that I wrote last year and have been querying it. And so far, I have submitted 65 query letters to agents and publishers. I've gotten 22 official no's, 23 probably no's, which I define as anyone who I haven't heard back from in 3 months, who I have every reason to expect to have said no, because otherwise they would have contacted me by this point. A handful of them, including one literally 45 minutes ago, from my probably no list, have reached out to say officially no. So thanks for that. But hey, rejection. And then I have 2 maybes, although really it's only 1 maybe. So the 2 maybes are, there's one woman who, after I submitted my initial query, changed literary agencies. And so she, I think, reached out to everyone and was like, "Hey, can you resubmit to my new place? Like, I might be interested." But it's like obviously a form letter. So I think it was more just about like getting her slush pile like moved to the new slush pile rather than an actual like, I like this idea. So I don't know what to think of that. And it's been a while since I resubmitted for her as well. So she's kind of a probably no, but I'm keeping her in the maybe for my vanity's sake. But then I did have a publisher that I submitted to directly, an editor, reach out and ask for pages, because that submission was just the query letter, just like the, synopsis, bio, please God give me attention letter. And so she requested the first 50 pages a little while after I submitted my query. So I consider that a maybe, because hey, some progress. She was interested enough to read, but then I haven't heard back and it's been like 2 weeks. So who knows? Querying is hell. But I have to say I do like this better than the screenwriting competition of it all, because like, one, querying is free.
Yeah.
I don't have to pay $100 for someone to say no, or to give me a 1 paragraph like review that's like, "I don't think women are funny," or whatever the screenplay feedback is. But yeah, so I like that this is the expected way to do it. Obviously, it's still very much who you know. If I happen to know an author with an agent, like that would be more helpful, but it's not exclusively who you know. So, there's some benefit to that. But I don't know. I'll probably give up in a year and do self-publishing and just be the indie book equivalent of the indie filmmaker that I was before. And who knows, maybe that'll be the path. I would hope to not do that, because I, similar to Christina, don't want to do all of that kind of stuff. I want someone else to do the hard stuff, even if I have to make compromises in the craft and vision in order to not have to deal with it. But we'll see.
Yeah.
My 5-star romances that I've read this year, in case anyone's looking for recommendations and for whatever reason is not subscribed to Forced Proximity, my Substack newsletter that releases new recommendations every Friday. The 5-star books that I've read this year are The Billionaire's Wake-Up Call Girl by Annika Martin, Happy Place by Emily Henry, Georgie All Along by Kate Claiborne. And we've got 2 Lenora Bell books. Lenora Bell was a new author that I started reading this year, and she's got some bangers in historical romance. The 2 that I found 5 out of 5 were What a Difference a Duke Makes and For the Duke's Eyes Only. 2 more books, also historicals, that were 5 out of 5. Chasing Cassandra by Lisa Kleypas. Lisa Kleypas, I understand why everyone was telling me to read her. I get it. I understand. Yes, the answer is yes. And then this one I read just a couple of days ago, Lord of Scoundrels by Loretta Chase. This is one of what's considered one of the like most iconic historical romances of all time. Like, it is on like every best of romance list. It came out, I think, late 90s, early 2000s, so it's a little bit older, and you can tell in some cases that it is. 100% I get it. Once again, I get it. So those are my 5 out of 5 reads. And then I've been watching more recently, just because I was home in Colorado and my mom was an invalid. So we had to do something. And so we watched like the first seasons of a bunch of shows that I had either not heard of or hadn't had a chance to watch yet. So my recommendations are as follows. So Help Me Todd, which is I think officially a CBS show, but we watched it on Paramount Plus. I did not know this show was a thing. It's by the guy that created Wilfred. It's really good. It's Skylar Astin and Marcia Gay Harding, and it's like a buddy cop, not buddy cop, but like buddy mystery solving duo where Marcia Gay Harding is a lawyer who wants to be named partner at her firm, and Skylar Astin is a down on his luck private detective who, because of a thing in the backstory, has lost his PI license for now, and so as a way of helping him get his life back together, his mom hires him as an investigator at her law firm. So already, hey, no cop detective, love that. And every episode it's like half legal procedural, half like detective story. So it's basically my catnip, and it's very fun. They have really really fun chemistry. They like the mother son duo of it all, and how she like thinks he's such a fuck up, but he's also obviously her favorite kid. It's so funny. Yeah, it's really fun, and they should hire me to run on it because it's a perfect show for me. And also, I'd like to meet Skylar Astin. But that aside, so Help Me Todd, pretty funny. Poker Face and Girls Five Eva on Peacock. I haven't finished Girls Five Eva yet. That was the last thing we were watching before we left, but you, I think, recommended it to me specifically. I understand why. Yeah, it's very fun.
It is, yeah.
That was my mom's favorite thing that we watched. She lost her mind. She thought it was so funny. Then we also watched the first season of The Diplomat on Netflix with Kerry Russell. Very good. Feels very like Madam Secretary or The Good Wife or West Wing newsroom kind of thing. Like it's very like a liberal wrote this about a world where politics makes slightly more sense. Although to its credit, it goes a little harder on like the realities. Like the season ends when they're trying to negotiate a deal to like come out against a bombing that's happened, and like the prime minister of the UK like wants to bomb Russia, and they're all trying to like talk him down, but like ultimately he has the keys to the car, and so like it's very interesting from like a perspective. Like none of the people who are working there are officially like politicians. They're diplomats. They're people who like talk to each other about how to make nice with each other, and it's a lot of like talking and handling the sort of more volatile actual political figures, which I thought was interesting. But yeah, it had a lot to say about like extremism and like knee-jerk reactions of nationalism to threats and stuff like that. I thought it was good, and allegedly a second season is coming for better or for not better off Todd. So Help Me Todd. What Todd pun are they using? Both of those shows allegedly have second seasons coming, so I'm excited about that.
Cool.
And then for more indie stuff, the latest full season of Dimension 20, the D&D show on Dropout, Never After, was very good. It was a horror fairy tale season. So they played this actually might be up your alley, Christina. The D&D game that they play in is like a basically a fucked up fairy tale. So like they play characters who are like iconic fairy tale characters. Like there's a guy that plays Pinocchio, a guy that plays the Frog Prince. His thing is that like he had stopped being a frog, but then as his wife started to fall out of love with him in their happy ever after, because he was kind of like a poncy little shithead, he started turning back into a frog, and so he's like a human-sized frog man for the whole show. Which I just think is a very funny inversion of that. They end up amicably divorcing. It's very funny, but they have a Sleeping Beauty who is like half torn up by the briars that had been protecting her. They've got a Little Red Riding Hood who turns into a werewolf. Who's the last one? Oh, and Puss in Boots is a character as well. The point being, they all play like iconic fairy tale characters, but like in a much darker version of all the stories, and it's like very horror inspired and very creepy. So it was fun. It was a good new season, and if you are a fan of D&D at all, definitely check out Dropout. They have like 100 seasons at this point of really, really high quality D&D story content.
Cool. Um, I don't have as extensive of a book update as you, but I have continued reading, which I think is like good on me considering last year in our end of year episode I said I had read 2 books for the year and then I started reading a ton, and so like pretty much end of November through early March of this year, I was averaging about 15 books a month I was reading. But I did fall
really good.
Yeah, really good. But then April, May, I definitely fell off because I've started riding my bike daily, which has been really lovely since the weather got nice, which means I've been reading less. But I'm still reading about 3 a month, which, is good.
Also not bad.
Yeah. And I've particularly enjoyed reading Shirley Jackson's whole kind of back catalog. She's great. Obviously I watch like a ton of shows and movies, so I'm not even going to touch like the stuff that I'm loving that are not new, but new stuff that I really loved. The show Jury Duty, which I don't think you tried, but
it's Amazon Prime. I did try. I watched up until James Marsden gets introduced, and I just cringed right out of there. I just couldn't do it. Yes. He sat down and somebody starts talking to him as a fan, and I'm like, I can't.
I love it so much.
I can't look him straight in the eye. I appreciate intellectually what they've done here. I cannot be in the audience.
Yeah, it's interesting just because like I don't know how I feel about it ethically. I think the guy who was like gaslit the whole time, I think that is not great. And like they give him a ton of money at the end to try and be like, it was a fun experience, but I don't know if he really I don't know if it was a fun experience. I did see, like, interestingly, I'm not even gonna Google it, like I'm not gonna give the whole premise, but I did see recently that he was having some struggle with paranoia after, and like texted James.
I was just gonna say that
James Marsden specifically and was like, I feel like cameras are still following me. Like I don't know what to believe is real and not real. And like James was on the phone with him for like 3 hours trying to like talk him down. And so it's like, it's nice that the people involved are staying in touch with him. And it's obviously like he was unemployed when he got what he thought was just like a documentary about jury duty. That's the premise of the show, and he obviously now has like $100,000 out of that, and so I'm sure he's happy, but has probably very mixed feelings because it's like it's a fucking weird thing to do to a person. And so I loved it. I enjoyed it so much as a viewer and as like a filmmaker. The last episode, they show you all the behind the scenes of how they pulled off certain things, so I loved that point of it. But also I was like, I feel like this is unethical and not okay, like what they did to this guy. So yeah.
Yeah, because I was gonna say before you even mentioned he was still feeling paranoid. I'm like, yeah, I mean, we already are so much more public than we have, like as a society, as we ever were. With like people making TikTok content about strangers in the subway and stuff like that. But like adding on this element that it might be like an official production fucking with you, like,
yeah,
I don't love the precedent that sets.
No, yeah. I have like very mixed feelings about it from that perspective, but it was such an entertaining show that was also really lovely because he was very likable, and like seeing him react to situations that were really absurd that he thought was real. So he was trying to be like nice about or respectful when it was just like ridiculous, was really entertaining. And seeing the actors like having to stay in character, it was a fun watch. But yeah, I mean, like for him, he thought he was making also friends, like he thought he was making real friends, and then to find out that they were, actors, and like it appears as if some of them have really stayed in touch, but it's still such a like it's a weird gray area. But I enjoyed the show, and I recommend it because I think it is like, from a filmmaking perspective, really interesting. And then I also really loved, also on Amazon, Class of '07, which
oh yeah, I didn't write that one down, but I remember you talking about
it's so funny. I graduated high school in '07, so there's like a level of the nostalgia factor for me, especially the soundtrack. But it's just such a delight. It's basically like Yellow Jackets, except instead of them in high school getting stranded, they're at their 10-year high school reunion and they get stranded, and
Mm.
it's in New Zealand and winter isn't an issue, and it's a comedy. But it's so funny and so incredibly nuanced. Like the characters sort of fall back into their high school personas, and so it creates like weird hierarchies and drama and tension. But even like the villains of the show are really fleshed out, and really like they feel very real and lived in and nuanced, and yeah, I just like I found it so delightful. It was such a good show by the end of it, and it was so funny the way it like subverted certain TV tropes, and also I think handles depression and like what it would look like to have depression in a post-apocalypse. It handles it really well. I feel, and so I really recommend it. And it's like all women. The entire cast is an all-girls school, so it's all women.
Oh,
I don't
nice.
think there's a single. The opening scene has a man on screen, but I think that's the only time a man is on screen, if I recall correctly. Maybe there's flashbacks of one guy, I think, but very minimal. And it's got a nice amount of representation across the board for New Zealand's diversity. Yeah, it's just a delight. I really recommend it. And I don't know, I like I don't even know if I kind of want to, I don't know if I want to mention it. Like I love the show Beef, but I don't love the decisions that were made, and you should read about that. And it makes me really angry at the lead actors who were producers on the show and the creator, writer, director. I think it's disgusting the decision that they made, and so I wouldn't watch it now. I wouldn't watch it again because like from a just an ethics perspective, I think they made the wrong choice. They cast someone who they could have cast anyone in that role. Like it was unnecessary that they cast this particular person. That said, I'm so glad I watched it the moment it came out and like didn't know any of that, because then I would have not I would have refused to watch it on principle and would have missed out on like an incredibly just amazing piece of art. Um, and so I just have such mixed feelings about it. And it's just like such a shitty thing that they could have just not chosen to cast a friend of theirs who told a story about raping a Black woman is the backstory. Whether like who they say now is not a true story, but regardless, it was told as a joke. And then the way it was handled, like he clearly is not remorseful and has never been. So the writing and everything involved was just so sharp and so, and as you know, as an Asian American, I really appreciated seeing representation of East Asian Americans on screen. It was just, yeah, it was just like it could have been something so wonderful for representation because it was such an excellent series, and it was just like ruined by a shitty decision that everyone involved made to just, I don't know, platform their friend. Like if you want to stay friends with someone who makes fun of raping someone, that's like a personal decision, but you don't need to cast them and give them a platform. And yeah,
Yeah.
so
Yeah, I only watched the pilot before all that came out, but the pilot was excellent.
yeah,
It was stressful. It was on the line for me about like if I can handle this. But yeah, the performances were magnetic.
yeah,
They're like the escalation is just so cathartic, even if you hate both of
yeah.
them. Yeah, it's just a shame.
And the way
And if
it
you are
all
also
comes full circle, like I don't know, I just because it's such a thing about generational trauma and sort of unchecked anger, like not expressing your emotions, holding your emotions in, and there's just so much richness to it, and like and the specificity of the East Asian experience in that part of LA. And like I don't know, it's just such an unfortunate thing because it had a really great message in the end that was like nuanced and complicated, and then to just like
I mean, it's funny how many like terrible decisions made, even just specifically in Hollywood, are so easy to avoid.
yeah,
Like, just make one less bad decision, just one,
yeah,
you know. But
yeah.
if you
So
want help processing things like this, we have a whole episode about it in season 2 question mark, season
I
1
think it might
question
be
mark,
season one.
sometime in the past. Yeah, it was a booby classic,
Yeah,
an episode about loving things by problematic people.
yeah.
So
And then the last thing I'll just say is I saw the movie Polite Society in theaters, and also a delight. Really recommend.
which one is that?
It's
See, I'm telling you, I'm so disconnected from what's going on right now.
It's a British comedy about a Pakistani family, particularly a young girl in high school who her dream is to be a stunt artist. And so because of that, there's like a hyper reality where her arguments and everything play out with fight sequences. Some like, bro-y assholes have been like, oh, it's just Scott Pilgrim, but it's really not. Like, okay, fine. The fight sequences are similar, but like Scott Pilgrim didn't invent that, and doesn't have, you sound like nothing else can
Also,
ever do.
I was gonna say Scott Pilgrim is like a very specific movie about a very specific thing. Just because there are high concept comedy fight sequences
Yeah.
does not mean that everything with high concept comedy fight sequences is Scott Pilgrim.
Yeah, but
Watch another movie.
yeah, it was wonderful to have like a Pakistani Muslim woman director tell the story about a Pakistani Muslim family, which you very rarely see. And it was just such a wonderful blend of like buddy comedy, because it's really a movie about sisterhood, but her sister who was in art school and dropped out starts dating a guy from like a snooty family, and the main character believes that he's evil, his family is evil, and so she is like trying to get her sister out of the marriage. And so it's sort of like it's got similarities to our film, actually, our script, in that it is like kind of a heist comedy, and the feminism aspect of it feels somewhat similar to ours, like the sort of commentary of it. It like very specifically comments on South Asian heteropatriarchy, which I appreciate, because like you don't see that very often. The specific nuance of that patriarchy. It's like what it's kind of commenting on and rebelling against, while still being a love letter to the culture, and like the music is such a great, it has like Bollywood music influence, with sort of like heisty soundtrack beats. I love the movie. I really recommend it. I think it's still in theaters by the time
Yeah,
it comes out.
I'm literally checking my local AMC right now.
And the theater near me has been doing a lot of revival screenings, so that's been really fun. They did a whole Hitchcock series back in, I think it was April. It might have been late March. And friend of the pod who we mentioned earlier, Ryan Kramer, came up to visit, and he watched a bunch with me, which was really fun. And they're screening The Thing this Saturday, tomorrow. So I'm going to go see that. I'm really excited. It's one of my favorite movies, especially when you get to see it like the film projection from a projector that is designed to project film, 35 millimeter film.
Nerd.
Yeah. Nerd, yeah.
I cannot imagine ever noticing that. And I so appreciate that you do, but could not be further from my experience of consuming media. I am such a 21st century hack.
Well, yeah. I mean, I have to say, seeing Psycho on the big screen was possibly one of my favorite experiences ever. Like the score, especially with the sound system they have in the theater, it was just so lovely. I mean, Hitchcock is like it was a piece of shit human, and I'm glad like I can spend money and know it's not going into his pocket.
Dead.
Yeah, he's dead, exactly. But his movies, man, I mean, he could make a movie, and some of them were just like, I rewatched Rear Window, which also is similar to our script in various ways, or like our script kind of references in various ways. And it really is a masterpiece. Like, I know that, like navel gazing film bros say that, and like I'm the first person to be like, okay, shut the fuck up. Like when they do it about something like Fight Club or whatever, like get over yourself. But I just have to say that Rear Window really is a masterpiece. And so seeing that on the big screen, which I'd never done, I'd only seen it in film school. Like that was the last time I watched it. And seeing it was just wonderful. So I'm enjoying that. I'm enjoying like my local art house theater and all of the revival screenings, and getting to watch them pretty much with like no one else in the theater with me, which is just so great too. Because I'm still very COVID conscious. And so I feel like I'm finally enjoying my town, which I did a little bit last year, but we had so many like home renovations. And of course, losing Addie was, awful. And so this like late spring into now, I feel like I'm really finally loving where I'm living and getting the fullest of it, and been doing walks with my neighbor too over by this reservoir by the water. And so yeah, it's been nice. Obviously there's always shit to be aware of, but for the most part it's been nice.
Well, that sounds lovely. I love that you're getting to know your area. I'm slowly doing that here. I'm more so now that we have a car, leaving LA a lot more, which I prefer. I like our area a lot. You know, we just signed a lease for another year in this particular apartment. But yeah, I miss what you were experiencing, having like a place, a community.
Yeah.
I don't really feel like I've had that since pretty early in my time in New York, and even more so since my time in college. But someday.
Yes. Someday.
And in the meantime, I have a car and I can escape whenever I want to.
Yeah. I am 3
So
years
we've been
older than
recording.
you, so I think it's like,
That's
you
true.
know, balances.
You are extremely ancient.
Yeah.
When you said that you graduated from high school in 2007, I was like, ugh, Crypt Keeper. I say having graduated in 2010. Such a young buck. And I finally got to the age where my mom is making concerned comments about how it's totally okay if I don't have kids, if my body can't handle it. And I was like, excuse you? I'm 31. So I guess final update for me, because I literally just got this email. Apparently a poetry anthology that I was published in last year was a finalist in the Indie Book Awards in the social justice category.
Congrats.
So I still have poetry stuff going on. It was all old poetry. I mostly just like updated a couple of old slam poems. But a friend of mine from high school who I used to do speech and debate with is now like basically the gay guy from my hometown, even though he didn't grow up in my hometown. And so he does a lot of like pride organizing and things like that. And he also runs the slam poetry community down there now. And he invited me to submit some of my old poems to their queer anthology called Slamming Bricks. And I got a couple of poems in, and now they're an Indie Book Award finalist, which is cool.
That's cool.
So I'm having success in every kind of writing but screenwriting.
For now. For now.
For now. Yes. Important to recenter positively. Okay. I feel like they're updated. Do you feel like they're updated?
100%.
Thanks so much to Kelsey Rauber for our theme music, Kaylee Brown for our podcast art, and to all of you for listening. Links to learn more about them are in our episode description.
And thank you to our Booby VIPs who are our $10 supporters on Patreon, patreon.com/breakingoutpod if you want a shout out at the end of every episode, just like our great friends Brandy Nicole, Kelsey Rauber, and Norman Steinberg.